Welcome to Lickin' on Lending, the podcast that dives deep into the heart of the mortgage industry. Your host, David Lickin, bringing you the latest insights, trends, and updates from the world of mortgages. Whether you're a seasoned industry veteran or just getting started, this show is your go-to source for all things mortgage. Let's get started. This is Lickin' on Lending. Now your host, David Lickin.
Welcome to today's podcast. Our guest today is a neuroscience educator, a Silicon Valley innovator, former Stanford University instructor, best-selling author, and transformational coach. Please welcome Petry Leanse. Am I saying that right, Leanse? Is that right?
You said it perfectly. Thank you, David.
Well, Ellen, thank you so much. It's just so good to have you here. And you are an expert in one of my favorite topics, and that's neuroscience, the brain. Tell us a little about yourself, and specifically, I'm really interested in what you did at Apple, Google, and some of your ventures as an entrepreneur.
Thank you. Well, I think Apple is a good place to start because I was very lucky to have ended up there in the early years, right after I graduated from college. And there I found something that probably set the course not only for everything on my professional journey, but very much my interest in the brain. I had grown up kind of as an artsy kid, but also sort of a nerdy kid. And people were always telling me, teachers and relatives, grown-ups of all sorts, I had to choose. I have to either choose to be in the arts or I needed to choose to be in the sciences. And I always felt that they were confused because to me, having both of those in my realm was always just the way I love to live. And the great news is that at Apple, I found a place where I could be both very creative and design oriented while still being very technical. I worked on the product side. And that really set the course for neuroscience for me because it helped me to see how people can get kind of caught in one side of their brain or one form of cognition or the other when there are so many advantages to bringing both parts together.
That's not always easily done. To bring both sides together. And you often say, begin with the brain. What do you mean by this, and why is it so important for our listeners to grab this concept?
Yeah, I do begin with the brain in everything that I do. And I often say when I speak about the brain, begin with the brain, an ancient technology we use to navigate the modern world. So the brain that we have has been evolving for, I could say hundreds of millions of years. It's actually much, much longer than that. But in the more directly primate to human to sort of Homo sapiens model, very much about being in environments where we had to be ever vigilant, ever watchful, just simply for survival, and where the motivation and reward systems that really guided our cognition and our mental states were about being both wary and opportunistic. Those technologies, survival technologies, are still with us in the modern world, even though very often the world that we have created demands would be one word, but also invites much more thoughtfulness, integrated thinking, reflection, and collaboration than that more ancient part of our brain really drives, or the ancient aspects of our brain really drive. I think it's super important for all listeners to realize that at every moment of our perception and of our experience, the brain is both functionally and neurochemically driving us to believe that what it is processing is what is real. And that can often be a little bit confusing for people or off the mark for people because a more ancient and very safety-oriented brain doesn't always align with the opportunities or even with some of the challenges that we face in modern life.
And so fascinating. And one of the things is you talk about is the brain being in charge versus learning to take charge of the brain. That was really interesting when we were talking about this because, we're taught to be logical beings. We're emotional beings. We're all these other things. How do emotions play into this?
So, there are three words that I use often when speaking about the brain, and you never really hear these in neuroscience, but these are the three words: left to itself. So left to itself, the brain is simply going to run its survival protocol and its program really of who it thinks we are and what it thinks our life is all about, based only on one thing, past experience. And that can be past experience that's been inherited from either our ancient or our recent past, or it can be our own lived experience. Think about this. Your brain is documenting right now new information that's going to update its formula, its program, for what it thinks it needs to do to keep you alive. Brains are always doing that. And the code that the brain is running when it's left to itself is going to be based upon everything that's kept us alive so far in our lives, whether we like it or not. And that means when that is happening, our brain is simply running its programs based on past experiences. And left to itself, it's going to lock us into living in that finite world based on reinforcements of past experiences. The brain has a very important function, David, and that is to conserve energy. In that ancient survival code, it believes that we might need more energy right now for that saber-toothed tiger that might jump out from behind the family picture I see there on your desk. It's always wary for that. It wants to reserve as much energy as it can so that you can escape that saber tooth. And the brain is the hungriest organ in the whole body. And the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is the most intentional part of the brain, is the hungriest part of that hungry organ. So the brain tries to reduce the energy flow to that part of the brain, and that thus have us just run the left to itself, more encoded ways of processing information. So yeah, and you mentioned emotions, and that's really interesting. Emotions are the brain's first responder. Any new information that's coming into the brain, well, I can't say any, most new information that's coming into the brain through any experience that we have, the brain runs through the emotional processing first to decide if it favors our survival or puts us at risk.
Interesting.
So, what's the tone? Is it negative or positive? And then how intense, like what's the amplitude of that experience? And it is going to inform everything else that happens cognitively after the information has passed through that emotional filter.
Very fascinating. So how, learning to take charge of your brain. A lot of us have thoughts that are racing through our heads, especially as, in the middle of the night, you're trying to get to sleep or you woke up and your brain kicks in, as I oftentimes say. How do we take charge of our brain then?
It's just great. The first thing you do is, remember, you have never been taught how to take charge of your brain. So, of course, nobody knows how to do that. So the first thing I want to do for any listener is say, let yourself off the hook. So many people say things like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with me. I have a personality that obsesses about thoughts, or I'm always ruminating, and that's how I am. No, that's your brain being left to itself because it's never learned anything differently. So one of the things to do first is remember that the brain will run its own programs, and brains will always do more of whatever they're doing right now. Let's think for a moment about the world that we live in. It tends to be very outcome-oriented, very deadline-oriented, very this or that, get it done, sort of linear. So the brain doesn't really know how to let go of that, sometimes even when we're sleeping. It's been so conditioned and rewarded to be on that, if you will, that, what do you call it, hamster wheel? Is that
the hamster wheel?
Yeah, exactly. That it's going to keep on doing that even when we want to sleep. The good news is we can begin practices, and when we hear people talk about mindfulness practices or meditation practices, all of these things point to having you be more intentional and in charge of your brain. And the way the brain does that is by learning to follow your lead with the intentions you direct with the prefrontal cortex. So that would be a mindset, for example. So you have a mindset, I'm going to stay calm through the course of my day. I'm going to go into this meeting knowing exactly what I need to succeed so I come out on the other side. If we activate the prefrontal cortex. And for folks who are only listening, I can't talk about the prefrontal cortex without bringing my fingers up to my forehead, right above my eyebrows, because that's where this part of the brain resides. And this is the home of our highest human cognition and our intentional ways of thinking. So let's give an example, David. Before we met, did you spend any moments thinking about questions you might want to make sure we cover in this conversation?
Absolutely. Yes, I did.
Then you had activated your prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
And the rest of your brain listened, and it knows now that that is your intention, and it's going to do everything it can to make sure, as long as you keep that intention, that you meet your needs. So you have taken charge of your brain for this conversation.
Well, this reminds me of the conversation of the gal that introduced us, Kelly Resendez, which I love Kelly. It's the way her brain works. It's obvious you spend a lot of time talking to her about this topic. And when you're talking about taking charge of it per se, you've given us some insights into that. I know of people whose brain is just running out of control. And it's that harnessing. Does journaling help doing that? What are some practical tips that really starts allowing people to be able to discipline and wrestle that overactive brain into a submitted sense?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is go in on language, because if we see it as a conquest, if we're saying we're going to wrestle it or get it to submit, we are activating things in our emotional system that are they're kind of more things like go for the fight. And that is, by definition, going to change the neurochemistry and change the nature of the intention. So I find myself getting curious, what can we do to work with our brains? What can we do to bring our brain into a more harmonious state for problem solving and so forth? Now you're in a very different sort of neurochemistry and emotional charge that is going to, at least theoretically, but, I think we could back this up with research, say that the brain will be less defensive and less on guard, which will take it a little bit more out of that attack mode that so many of us are living in. So there are a couple of ways to do this, both short-term and long-term. The best way short-term is with breath, because when the brain is under any sort of threat response or any sort of emotional hijack, it actually sends out chemicals that are reducing the flow of oxygen to the prefrontal cortex.
Really?
Yes. So I told you before that the brain is a cheapskate, right? It's very much about energy efficiency. And I also told you this is the most energy hungry part of the brain. If you're in any sort of threat, it thinks you need to do something to survive. So it's not going to bring your highest human cognition online.
Interesting.
So one breath can bring more oxygen into the body and into the brain, which allows more flow of oxygen to the prefrontal cortex. The minute that prefrontal cortex starts getting more oxygen, it has more capacity to come online. So, I love to say A, B, C. When we find ourselves getting hijacked or we go, wait, I can't stop spinning, I can't stop thinking. A, awareness. I'm aware something is different than I want it to be. Then B, breath. One breath brings more oxygen into the brain, and also the action of the brain in its mapping is very different on an inhale than it is on an exhale. So one deliberate breath actually brings more brain online, and then the exhale can help us focus. And then the C, because I said ABC, awareness, breath, and curiosity. Gather more information. Why am I feeling like this right now? Oh, I know. It's because I'm on a deadline and I haven't thought it through. Or what do I need to know to provide a better response than the reaction my brain was pointing me to? So those are short term, A, B, C, using the breath. Longer term, there are a couple of practices, David. We already mentioned mindfulness and meditation practices, but you brought up journaling. Anything that is a reflective practice is going to activate bigger picture ways of thinking, generally associated with functions in the right hemisphere, and allow the brain to come into more balance. Reflection is a really important word, and I want you to think about the typical day of your listeners, or pretty much, most people in society right now. Who is building time into their days for reflection these days? Fewer and fewer people.
Sure. Yeah.
But any meditative, reflective, even spiritual practices, some people do things like walking a labyrinth or something like that.
Yes.
All of these are going to be activating different potentialities in the brain in a way that, because your brain does more of whatever it's doing right now, with time can allow the brain to function in very different ways.
Hi, everyone. If you're looking to level up your golf swing or your loan process, you can do both at MBA Annual in Las Vegas. Stop by the Byte meeting room and tune up your golf swing on our pro-grade golf simulator and receive personalized coaching from an 8-time winner of the PGA Best Junior Golf Coach Award. Test out your skills on golf courses from around the world. Don't worry, all skill levels are welcome, so have fun with it. While you're there, check out the all-new next-generation Byte LOS platform and see why over 97% of lenders using Byte say they would recommend it to their peers. Visit bytesoftware.com/MBA25 to register for your turn in our golf simulator, or stop by the Byte room on level 4. See you in Las Vegas.
That is just so fascinating, especially as you started thinking. I was just at a place at a labyrinth this weekend, and I went and walked it, and I'd going like, man, this is just, there's something that's just settling about that as I went through the various stages of it. You know,
Well, I want to ask you, what did you experience as you walked in that labyrinth?
first of all, my brain tried to figure it out. I mean, my brain kicked in and going, okay, what's this about? How does this go? And then I just started walking it, and I found there was just a relaxation that came, and more of a meditative type attitude or a frame of mind, I guess, or mindset that came into it. And by the time I got to the bench where I sat myself down afterwards, I was just like, I was breathing differently. It was just quite amazing. So,
By the way, can I go in on that?
Yes.
That is a wonderful story. So your brain went into it saying, here I am, David, I'm in the new situation. I approach new situations like we all do. What do I need to figure out? What do I need to do? So the brain is supporting you. Left to itself, it's doing that. Then as your body and, of course, your nervous system and all sorts of other things came into flow, I'll bet your breath and your heart rate slowed down.
Slowed down.
Before you knew it. Now there's more blossoming in the brain that allows new types of thought, new types of reflection. So congratulations, you did some neuroscience.
Yeah, well, it was quite by accident. We talk about the frontal cortex. You talk about the frontal cortex. It's oftentimes the latest stage of your brain in the brain development, if I understand correctly. Why is this? I mean, does neuroscience give us any insights into this?
Oh, a lot. So, I mean, that's a whole podcast episode unto itself because it's so fascinating. So one way to think about the brain is that evolution guided its development from the very back here, the more associated with the spinal column. These tend to be very survival-oriented things. And then getting up to the sensing. And by the way, this is a lot more. This is in vertebrate development. This is going back hundreds and hundreds of millions of years. But next came sensing, like the sight organs, the listening and so forth. This part is in the front. The brain kind of developed from back to front over these hundreds of millions of years. So this is the newest and most uniquely human part. Now we could go out and look at orcas or hamsters or any primate, even goldfish, even birds. They're all going to have their own version of what is called invertebrates, the prefrontal cortex. But all of these are as uniquely suited for their niche in the environment and what it takes for them to survive as it is in the human brain. But in a fast-paced culture like we live in now, the brain doesn't naturally let this come online in the way that probably would serve us best of all.
Interesting. So fascinating. Let's get this now into the world of mortgages, because we're in the mortgage industry. Buying a home and getting a mortgage or even a refinance is one of the most emotionally charged transactions. It's interesting. We're talking about emotions. We're talking about neuroscience, and we're talking about emotions, and they are connected. But consumers go through. What's your advice to real estate professionals and others in navigating this emotional, intense transaction?
Well, that's a great question. What's coming to mind for me is the times that I've bought a home. I've done that a couple of times. And it is very emotionally charged because, first of all, you're managing a lot of complex information. You're probably, that brain left to itself is going like, I'm overwhelmed. There's also financial pressure. Very often there's getting, things about getting a partner, or a spouse, or even a family to sort of buy into this notion of everything that it's going to take to move. So I'm curious, do you think that very often these people who are buying homes show up in a highly charged emotional state?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
What
absolutely.
what would that sound like? What might they say?
There's a lot of them are just, there's anxiety, and it could show up in so many ways, but related to the nature and the makeup of the individual. Some are very direct. So if they're more of a choleric personality type, they're going to be very direct and more aggressive. And then if you're using a sanguine type personality, they're going to be a lot more talkative, and they're nervous, so they're using a whole lot of words, which sanguines have a tendency to do. And so, and a phlegmatic's going to approach it with a much more acquisitive, but they may be coming with more analytical. So in other words, I think it's amping up whatever your personality type is. They bring that is what
Totally makes sense. Yeah. And I'll bet you that that you're well prepared, the people who, are listening to this, they know their business well. So I'll bet when those people come in and they're in that sort of fight or flight mode for nothing else.
Fight or flight's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah. I'll bet your professionals are coming back with really clear and good answers that are
Better ones do, yeah.
Okay, good. But you know what? There could be a problem there because the client is coming at an emotional level and the professional is coming in and answering on a logical level. And emotions and logic, well, how often do we see those two get along, right?
No.
Not too often. So this makes me curious, David, and I wonder what might be possible when a client is being emotional and whether they're filling air with noise, just, using words to process their own thoughts, or they're being combative or argumentative, or whatever else is going on that shows they're in an emotionally charged state. What I think your professionals could do at that time is acknowledge the emotions. Because once that happens, it can allow that fight or flight response to soften even a little bit and create a new wedge where the logic could come in after that. So a person comes in and they're like, I don't think we can make it. I've been talking to this and I don't know, and I don't think we can make the timing work, or whatever they're doing. If all your professional does is come in and say, yeah, it's a really hard thing, isn't it? It's complicated. All of a sudden, you are taking some of that fight or flight offline, and then just with a little bit of breath. And by the way, we humans don't really understand how much information we exchange with each other. If your professionals were to use breath to stay very present at that time, I believe that alone could have an influence on an emotionally hijacked or reactive person. I'm also going to share one of the best questions and I learned it from another coach out there, and I love it. When a person is in a highly charged emotional state and they're sort of losing it in whatever way, a great question is to ask, what would great be? And it allows people to switch gears mentally and come into more of an intentional prefrontal cortex vision, where they might be able to say what they want. I just want my partner to agree that this is the right house for us to get. I just want to make sure that my commute isn't going to be terrible once I move to this new neighborhood. I want my kids to make friends at school. Whatever it is, they're naming what great would be. Now you can be on the same team with that person and optimize for that. Does it add up?
Yeah, that totally adds up. So there's a certain amount of empathic,
right?
Skill set that's required here, and those that are more interested, they're more skilled, and I'm finding have a degree of empathy and more empathic in their approach. This really bleeds into work-life balance. That's something you talk a lot about, and it's the holy grail for a lot of working professionals. If you could get into this whole work balance, because I've struggled with that all my life.
Well, this could get into a longer conversation, but one of the things we have to remember is in our culture, people are really validated, and really our sense of identity is wrapped up in what we do, Not so much who we are, but what we do. Think about countless rooms you've walked into when you're meeting people for the first time. The first question they ask is, what do you do?
Yes.
And we're all sort of positioning ourselves through that doing sort of thing. And if you look at the even activities that we choose, we're going on fabulous ski vacations, or we're collecting something, or we're training for a marathon, or whatever we're doing. We're really into that sort of linear pursuit of outcomes, that doing.
Yes.
And remember, your brain will do more of whatever it's doing right now. So your brain thinks that's how you should be all the time. So what I encourage my clients, and sometimes I speak about it, other people to do, is begin with life. What is the purpose of your life? When I look at the real estate of the brain and also look at timeless human ways of living, there are relationships, those are very important, contribution, which is, work, and growth, learning, becoming a better person. The things that your listeners are doing right now, they're looking to grow and improve themselves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So start with life, my relationships, the nature of my contribution, and how I wish to grow. And then that's your balance, is how you make those things work. And then how does work fit into it? So if I'm prioritizing my balance for relationships, contribution, and growth, and I'm intentional about it, maybe I think about it as I wake up in the morning, I'm going to make sure I have time to talk to my kids when I get home at night, or with my partner, or walk my dog, and just say or see my friends, right? Connections. How does my work fit in with that? My profession, like how do I want to be really good at what I do, and what place do I want my work consciously to play in my life? And then growth. What am I learning today? What is the hobby I'm developing? What is the next thing I want to read or study? So beginning with, if we look at work-life balance, invert it. Start with life-work balance. Find small ways to get the work to fit in with the life. And David, it's counterintuitive, but I've been a C-level executive at a big technology company. I've been a founder. I've managed people over the years. The ones who lead with life, but with a real commitment to being excellent in their work, but having their life check that, they don't burn out, right? Yeah. They don't get into the drama and the squabbles. They're balanced. Now, I do have one thing that everybody should do, because this is one of the, I can't say shortcuts, but one of the sure paths to bringing more balance into your life.
Yeah.
Do you know that something like 87% of American adults pick up their phone when they wake up in the morning?
Yes.
The first thing they do in the morning.
I'm trying not to.
Okay, well, we'll play with that in a minute. But the first thing they do is they look at their phone. The first message their brain gets in the morning is, okay, this is what my day's going to be like. It's going to be on. Yeah. You cannot have work-life balance if that's how you begin your day. So my admonition, my suggestion is, for the first 20 minutes of every day, and there does seem to be some magic in that 20 minutes. It seems like a number that's sort of a sweet spot. Do anything but use your phone. Your phone there isn't a single email waiting in there.
Right.
Can't wait 20 minutes. So I do use, what's that?
I said, that's a really good point. Yeah, I've been challenged.
It can wait, but the mind is so conditioned to get the reward of this. I do use my alarm on the phone. I turn it off in the morning, one button, stop, and then I do not touch that thing until after I've had I love coffee, after I've had my coffee, after I've done some stretching, and then I go over to it with a very different and much more intentional mindset than I would have if I'd let it take me over. Now, if you really want to do it, follow the same rule at night. The first 20 minutes, the last 20 minutes, anything but your phone or your laptop. And then, David, one more thing.
Is it the light? Because there's the blue light is a factor. I've heard that as well.
The blue light is, I think it's, I told you the left hemisphere, and really the way we live is linear pursuit of outcomes. There is an answer and I'm going to get it. I want it now, all of this. You're pointing your brain toward that sense of urgency that inherently throws things out of balance.
Interesting.
Yeah. Then I would also say that if you really want to double down on it, even putting your phone facing down in a meeting rather than up changes everything in your mental realm. It actually, some of the research shows that if your phone is up, you're going to be distracted at least every 6 minutes. If your phone is down, you're closer to 11 minutes.
Really?
That's the difference. And then if you put it down and you get to 11 minutes, push it away. Maybe you'll get to 12. Maybe you'll get to 15. Like bringing back our ability to be present and not hijacked by all that's going on around us is a big part of taking charge of your brain.
This is such a fun topic. Let's talk about one of the books you've written. One book, or how many books have you written?
I've written 2 books. I wrote a book when I was, back in the 80s at Apple, I wrote a book. At Apple, such a great story, like such good fortune for me, but I launched the world's first public-facing online community. So I brought Apple online in 1985, making it the first company in history to have it. It wasn't such an honor. It was all I do was like plug a modem into a cable and boom, it happened. Like we didn't know what we were doing, but it worked out great,
No kidding.
But I wrote a book about how to build digital communities, public-facing online communities. But that was back in the 80s. And I have one copy of that book in a box in my attic somewhere, and I'm going to have to go back and read it for nostalgia's sake, because think of how much in the world has changed since then.
Oh, yeah.
But the second book that I wrote is called The Happiness Hack, and the subtitle is Take Charge of Your Brain and Bring More Happiness to Your Life. And this book was written in 2017, I believe, and it was really as mobile technologies were becoming ubiquitous and more people were living like this, and constant, and that were like this. I have my phone in front of my face.
Yes.
So many experiments about what that's done to our attention, our focus, and even to our moods. And that book is about both timeless wisdom about cultivating a healthy mindset, but also things we can do right here, right now in this culture to create healthier relationships between us and our technology.
Fantastic. I mean, it's great information. When you go back in your work, you go back to the topic of our home financing experience. What are some tips that you would suggest for people to help relieve their consumers' anxiety, bring them down a notch? Because it is the most emotional transaction most consumers are going through.
Boy, I wish I had a, ding, ding, ding answer for you. I have to go back to sort of 2 kind of core concepts. And one of them is really getting them to think about what great would be. So let's say they come back, well, what would great be? I want my son to make the new soccer team, or I want my daughter to, win the science fair, whatever it is, or I want to make sure that I make new friends in this neighborhood, all of this. Really work with what the great thing would be like. Wow, it's really interesting to think about building a community or about the opportunities as you move to this better school district or whatever else. But the other thing is I always go back to a big picture. And I have to really think for a moment.
That's really good. I think it's good. For me, for what I found successful is helping them anchor on why are they doing this transaction, get to their why.
Good. The why is great. There's something else too, and that is, if it's good enough for Olympic athletes, I guess it's good enough for anybody else, and that is visualization. So, even I wonder if you say, when you see yourself walking through the neighborhood, what feels great to you? Oh, I love the way the trees line the street, or I love how the building is energy efficient, or whatever it is. Get them talking about the bigger picture of what they seek. If they're planning to live there for a long time, just, how do you think you'll celebrate your holidays there? Things like get them to visualize like an athlete. Remember, David, everything we do changes the brain. Your brains and mine have changed in this conversation. Your brain now has an updated map, as does mine, of what we can do to stay safe and alive. And so lift up the potentiality that the client can see. Help them go into a visualization of something that they probably want to buy this house. They probably made the decision to seek something else. Even if they're downsizing or something, they want less pressure, less work. Let's talk about the positive motivators and get them to visualize that. And here's another little, first of all, ask them, what would that, what do you see when you look at your house during the holidays? Something like that. Get them to see it. Here's another thing too is, it was right there after the what do they see? Well, I guess that was the key point. Like, visualizing it as if they were an athlete and really getting them to come much more into a sensory or embodied experience rather than a spinning thought experience. You're going to change everything in their neurochemistry and the sensations they're feeling.
Yeah, fascinating topic. Neuroscience is just one of my favorite topics and getting into it, understanding it. How can people connect with you? Do you have podcasts? Do you have videos out there, Ellen? How do people learn more about you?
I do have a podcast. It's called The Brain and Beyond. I've been on hiatus for a couple of months because I was working on a very large project here in the city where I live, in New Mexico. So that took a lot of my effort for the last 3.5 months. But my website is ellenleanse.com, and I'm pretty easy to find. My TEDx talks are pretty available online. And
I loved your TEDx talk. I encourage you. In fact, we'll put a link to your TEDx talk in our show notes from today, so people could click on it and
that sounds great.
Connect with you. It's just I look at how fast the time goes. This is my favorite topic. Ellen, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge and insights into this very fascinating topic. And it does play into everything we do. And I love the idea. Challenge our listeners to start controlling your brain. You take control of it. It is so important. It begins with your brain, but it begins with you, the effort of taking charge. Very good.
100%. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to having you back. I just love this topic.
I'd be honored. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, this podcast was made possible by our sponsors, Byte Software, First Close, Angel AI, True, Candid, Mortgage Bankers Association of America, Lenders One, Modex, Redder, and Mortgage Advisory Tools, and Fuel Inc. Good to have you with us. Thank you. Like and subscribe and share this with others. See you back here next podcast.
You've been listening to Lickin' on Lending. Our passion is to bring you the latest insights, trends, and updates from the world of mortgages. So on this show, if you're a seasoned industry veteran or just getting started, it's your go-to source for all things mortgage. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We'll be back soon. Take care, and we'll see you next time on Lickin' on Lending.